everyone, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about migraine headache therapy, recovery, and a brand new approach. In my practice right here in West Boca Raton, Florida, I am a functional medicine practitioner as well as a doctor of chiropractic. I initially started seeing musculoskeletal patients that suffered with migraine headaches, and from time to time I would get a lot of success with these patients because musculoskeletally speaking, they're in front of their jobs all day long, in front of the computer, the way they sleep, driving, getting up and getting down, having kids pulling on their neck, and these musculoskeletal headaches were being helped. However, over time I kept getting migraine headache sufferers that wouldn't get any relief with some of the therapies that I would do. They would see their pain management doctors, they would get CT scans, they would get NCD, EMGs, every test you can think of, CTs, and still they would suffer with migraine headaches. So what I decided to do was to go back to the learning board, if you will, and I went back to further my education in functional medicine, and now I am a certified functional medicine practitioner. I've been doing that for the last 5 years, and I've been getting a lot of success. And so what I wanted to do was to teach you a little bit about the metabolic approach that we use, the genetic testing approach, which is brand new since 2003 when the genetic human genome project was completed. We learned about all the what we'll call polymorphisms or genetic SNPs that people have that don't allow them to make fuel or make happy peptides or to be able to reduce inflammation or detoxify. And you'll find with migraine headache sufferers, the majority of them are all inflamed, and even 90% of the patients that have migraine headaches are estimated to have methylation problems, which I'm going to talk to you about today. So basically the title of this workshop or this PowerPoint presentation is Metabolic Treatment, Genetic Testing, and Brain-Based Therapy for the Treatment of Migraine and Chronic Headaches. So not just migraine headaches, cervicogenic headaches, rebound headaches, cluster headaches, anything that gives you pain in the head and you are looking for a new solution besides having to take your anti-seizure medications or your triptans. Those could be very, very helpful, but at the end of the day, it's not helpful for your liver, and you are probably looking for another solution besides just having to take medication. And the best thing about this is that it's all natural. It's learning about what's going wrong in your body, trying to fix it from the inside, trying to learn why physiologically or biochemically you're not able to reduce inflammation or why you are inflamed and what you can do about it naturally. So, what I suggest you do is get a pen or a pencil, a piece of paper, because this is going to be about a 45-minute to an hour video. I'm going to share with you a lot of information, and what I want you to do is if this information rings true to you and it strikes a chord, then please give me a call and take advantage of my offer at the end of this video, because you can sit here and get all this useful information, and then at the end of the day, you don't do anything about it, whether it's with me or with someone else. And if you don't do anything about it, it's like not even having that information anymore. So if it strikes a chord and you're shaking your head yes, and that applies to me, and that sounds like me, and that's something that I need to do, then I urge you, please give me a call, 561-883-0090, and I'll give you an opportunity to do that at the end of the video. So again, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I've been a chiropractic physician for the last 14 years, and I have been doing functional medicine for the last 5 years. I am also board eligible chiropractic nutritionist, so the majority of my protocols that we try to do address your inflammatory conditions from a holistic, natural point of view. The great thing about functional medicine is that all doctors learn the biochemistry and the microbiology and the physiology in the first couple of years. However, what they don't do is they don't apply it when they get into practice. Or they do, where they tell you to eat healthier or to try to lose weight, try to exercise more, reduce your sodium or your fat intake. But that's a really, really generic explanation of what you need to do to really help yourself. So nutrition is a big, big part, and functional medicine and biochemistry and learning what's going wrong from the inside and addressing these things. And this is what this video is about. As well, I am a functional neurologist studier, if you will. I graduated from the American Functional Neurology Institute, and really what we do is we try to combine the neurological relationship and the metabolic relationship, and that's what we'll be talking to you today. So grab your pen, sit down, and let's teach you a little bit. Again, so all chronic conditions that we see in my office, I see a lot of chronic condition suffering in my office. So I see fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, migraine headaches, I see peripheral neuropathy, thyroid disorders, gastrointestinal problems, insomnia. I see a lot of chronic condition patients. In fact, that's what I dedicate my practice towards now. And if you're watching this video and you're a sufferer of a migraine headache, I could pretty much guarantee that you're not only suffering with migraine headaches. Chances are, because we mentioned all inflammation creates a lot of chronic problems, then you're chronically inflamed. So there are chances where on the left side of this slide here, you are suffering with potentially high blood sugar, maybe to the point that you're insulin resistant or even hypoglycemic low blood sugar, or you may even be diabetic. That certainly is contributing to some of the inflammation that you have in your body. In fact, insulin is an acute phase reactant, and if you can't control your insulin, then you'll be inflamed. And what I'll tell you is inflammation is like taking a blowtorch to the screen. So if I have a blowtorch and I take this blowtorch to the screen, how well are you going to be able to see the TV? Not very well. Same thing. If I take a blowtorch to your vessels or your brain or your kidney or your liver or your pancreas, it's not going to be functioning very well. So we need to reduce the inflammation. Other conditions that you may be suffering with at the same time is a thyroid problem, maybe taking thyroid medications, fibromyalgia, pain, generalized discomfort, not just only in the neck, but also in the middle back, in the shoulders, in the legs, in the calves, everywhere. I mean, you're really suffering. Also, we see patients that have vertigo that have migraine headaches, and they've gone for VNG studies or platform studies or dizziness studies. And you know what? You can do all the studies till the cows come home, but if you don't actually have an approach to try to fix the inflammation and try to reduce what is actually causing the problems, then you're not going to get very far. And like I said, some of these medications, anti-seizures and the triptans, they could be helpful, but they're not going to fix everything. They're not going to lower your blood sugar. So what does that mean? You need to get on metformin, or it's not going to reduce your blood pressure, or it's not going to help fight off infections, or it's not going to help with methylation issues if you're not converting usable forms of nutrition that you're eating into things that can detoxify or pathways that occur in our body. And so medication really is a short-term solution. And medication is good for a lot of things, but when you have a migraine headache sufferer and they're dealing with insomnia, gastrointestinal problems, Crohn's colitis, maybe blood sugar dysregulation, when they have all this stuff going on, you need to fix those things and knock them down one by one. So other things that you're suffering with potentially are Crohn's and colitis, PCOS and infertility. Good chances are that your own immune system is attacking the body, and you know that you're multiple autoimmune sufferer. As well, metabolic imbalances. So if we look at your blood work, some of the things that we may see are anemias. And again, you may have normal blood tests. Patients that I see all the time where I do a workup on them, they say, don't worry, doc, I have normal blood tests. And when I look at their blood tests, they're normal from the lab range, but they're not necessarily normal from what's considered functional. Functional means what's healthy. So when you figure out how do we come up with these lab ranges, we basically take an average of all the people that took the lab test the year before, whether they're sick or not sick, and most of the time, people that go get their labs done aren't necessarily the most healthy people. And so, or even the standard American person is not always healthy. I think we have over 50% of the people that are obese. So you want to be compared to what's considered a healthy person, not necessarily the average person. But anyway, so what they do is they combine all the averages of the people that took the lab the year before. They figure out the average high and the average low. And if you're beyond that average high or the average low, you're told you're not normal. If you're within inside that average high and that average low, you're told you're normal. And the problem with that is that you could not be normal per se. Like you could have symptoms, you could have migraine headaches, you could have light sensitivity or auras or ringing in the ears or pressure point behind the head or vertigo or dizziness, but your blood tests are normal. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. And what we want to do is compare you to a healthy range. And so I see a lot of patients that suffer with what we call functional anemia. they are trending towards a laboratory range. Their MCVs or their cells are too big, their red blood cells. They may not have a great absorption rate for B12 or folic acid. We'll get into that a little bit. And so what happens is these red blood cells don't mature. However, they're not too big to call it abnormal. Yet it's not healthy. That person is anemic or trending towards anemia. They're fatigued, they have brain fog, they have a lot of the symptoms of anemia, yet they're not over the line, so we're told that they're normal. Potentially there's thyroid dysfunction. We talked about unstable blood sugar. There's a good chance that you're adrenally fatigued because we have this stress in the North American climate or the North American culture where we're always stressed. We have bills to pay. We work. We have toxins that we're exposed to. We have food sensitivities. We don't eat healthy foods. Standard American diet has too much omega fats to omega 6 to omega 3, so we're inflamed. We have all these things that are pulling us in different directions that's causing so much inflammation in our body that ultimately we're causing our adrenal glands to fatigue, because our adrenal glands are our calming sort of cortisol or steroid producing anti-inflammatory gland that settles inflammation. And if we constantly on a daily basis have to settle the inflammation from all the things that I just mentioned, then you're not settling inflammation. And guess what? When you have inflammation in your head or in your brain, your cranial nerves get inflamed, and cranial nerve 5, your trigeminal nerve, can get inflamed, and then we have sort of a rebound phenomena of headaches. So it all starts with fixing you from the inside. And I think that probably makes sense to you. Also, when we have uncontrolled inflammation, then the next thing you know, our immune system basically produces the inflammation. And so when our immune system produces the inflammation, all of a sudden our immune system is not being held in check. And what happens from there? The immune system, like any person that's going to try to fight off its enemy, is going to unrecognize who's the enemy and who's the good guys. And so what that means to you is potentially your own tissues, your own glands, your own organs are being attacked by your own immune system. And that's what we call an autoimmunity. So type 1 diabetes, we also see IBS, Crohn's, colitis, and some neurological ones like Parkinson's or myasthenia gravis or even Alzheimer's or Lou Gehrig's, ALS. These are all autoimmune conditions, or rheumatoid or psoriatic arthritis, Hashimoto's. These are all things, there's estimated to be more autoimmunities in this day and age than there ever has been. And that's, again, as a function of what's going wrong with our body. And one of the big things is our adrenal glands. Also, hidden infections is huge. Parasites. As we get older, you know, a lot of us like sushi, but if you don't eat sushi, that doesn't mean you're not going to be able to get a parasite. Basically, as we get older, we don't digest our food as well when we were younger. And so it's estimated that after the age of 30, we lose a lot of the capacity to disinfect food, to squirt it with hydrochloric acid or digestive enzymes. So what happens is that food, that heavy protein that we all love to eat, just sits there, or that processed food that we all love to eat just sits there. And when it sits there, it doesn't dissolve into small particle or microscopic food sources that can be absorbed quite easily. So it sits there and it ferments, and then it creates a gastric burning. And then what do? We tend to go on antacids, which is the wrong thing to do. There are a percentage of people that have antacid necessities in that they produce high acid, but more often than not, you have low stomach acid because you are disinfecting your food suboptimally, or you have lost the capacity to do that, and it sits there. And then all of a sudden it creates that inflammation. And what did we talk about inflammation? It's a blowtorch. So now that inflammation takes a blowtorch to your gastrointestinal lining or your nice tight junctions that will allow for food to not pass through into the bloodstream undigested. So food now passes into the bloodstream undigested, as well as bacteria isn't killed off, funguses aren't killed off, viruses aren't killed off, and parasites aren't killed off. Nothing freaks my patients out more than to tell them they have parasites. Who wants to have known little worms inside our gut? But anyways, what happens is we lose the ability to disinfect these foods, and next thing you know, the inflammation in our gut creates leakiness of our gut. And then as a result of that, we gluten, we eat breads, we eat dairy. These are all GMO food that our body doesn't recognize anymore. And what happens is we develop a food sensitivity. Now, every time you eat gluten and dairy or soy or egg or let's even nuts or rice or quinoa, whenever you eat certain foods, you're going to have a undigested portion of that food pass into your bloodstream, and now your immune system, which isn't being held in check, attacks it. And then all of a sudden the inflammation that circulates in your bloodstream circulates to your brain, and then you have migraine headaches, and you're taking anti-seizure medications. And that's not addressing any of those problems. So I'll always ask a patient that I do an initial evaluation on, has anyone ever told you about food sensitivities? And if they haven't, then that's a huge thing that could be life-changing. And again, we talk about genetic testing. Genetic testing is a big problem. And then let's talk about neurological imbalances. I hinted on it a little bit, which means when we have a problem with inflammation in our gut, and that goes into the bloodstream, then that's going to circulate into the brain, and then now you know we have inflammation in the brain. And so one of the things that migraine sufferers that I see in my office suffer with is not only migraine headaches, but now they have focus, concentration, depression, they have balance disturbances, they have musculoskeletal pain, they have concentration, they have a lot of brain-based problems, and that's not being addressed. So that's what I always like to tell my patients is all cases that I see in my office are a combination of neurological involvement, where you have what I just mentioned, where your frontal lobe or your temporal lobe, your memory, your sound, your smell, you smell things other people don't smell, or you hear things other people don't hear, or feel things other people don't feel. Your balance, you get motion sickness, your concentration, you can't plan, you can't do things in chronological order. I mean, patients are really suffering, and so there's a lot of neurological component. And then what we mentioned earlier, the metabolic component, the inflammation, the adrenal glands, the blood sugar, the food sensitivities, the anemias, the chronic infections. These things need to be addressed, people, and we can do that in the office. So typically when we see a migraine headache sufferer, the average is about 60% neurologic and 40% metabolic. So let's talk about the metabolism. So patients will ask me, what is my metabolism? Or what does metabolism mean? Or my metabolism is very slow, and that's why I can't lose weight. In a nutshell, metabolism means when you convert food into energy, or you convert food into glucose, or you convert food into ATP. And there's a lot of factory workers that are needed on the assembly line to make that process happen easily or naturally. So you need to have digestive enzymes, and you need to have hydrochloric acid, and then you need to have a proper immune function, and you need to have proper adrenal gland function, and you need to have proper mitochondrial function, and you need to have proper pancreatic function, proper glandular function, proper methylation function. So you could imagine there's thousands of factory workers that one or two could be missing, and at the end of the day, the end product isn't completed properly, and we don't have proper energy production. That's what metabolism is. So the question I like to ask is, linking the metabolism to the neurological system, if we convert food into energy, that energy needs to go somewhere. It needs to go to our cells. It needs to go to our endocrine glands. It needs to go to our digestive system to be able to do that function properly. It needs to go to our nervous system, which is our brain and our spinal cord and all our nerves that communicate to our cells. It needs to go to our immune system that fights off infection and keeps us healthy. It needs to go to our cardiovascular system, which transports blood to the different tissues. Which system do you think it needs to go to 30% of the demand? And the answer is our central nervous system. So that means things like our brain, our nerves, our focus, our concentration. And so if you're not converting food into energy very well, then my migraine sufferers are not only dealing with migraines, they're dealing with brain fog. They can't sleep. They're depressed. They have anxiety. They can't focus. They can't balance. They get dizzy when they stand up too quickly. Their blood pressure falls. So these are all things, if you're suffering with and you're like, yeah, that's me, and my anti-seizure medications and my triptans haven't changed all that, and what you're saying makes sense, then I urge you to give me a call at the end of this video. So basically, if we're not converting food into energy and we have poor blood sugar metabolism, then we're going to have a bad brain. So let's talk about the brain connection. The brain connection is basically your brain is one big sensory organ. So you have touch, you have smell, you have hearing, you have taste, you have proprioception, which basically tells your brain where your body is. You have vestibular balance. You have a lot of different things that at the end of the day, if I touch you here and I ask you where do you feel that, the correct answer is in the opposite hemisphere in my brain. Or when I look at the video, where do you see with that? Your eyes are just the sensory receptor, but your brain, the part of the brain is where the actual information goes to. So your brain is one big sensory receptor, and the two things that stimulate it on a daily basis is touch and gravity. So we constantly need to be touched. I think there's sad studies in either Romanian or Russian orphanages where these babies literally died when they're not touched because their brains didn't develop. Or astronauts go into outer space and their brains atrophy because they don't have gravity there. So that's why they have them doing these exercises. The point of this slide is that your brain needs constant stimulation. And if you're not giving it proper fuel, it's going to fatigue from the stimulation that it's getting. And that's what we need to address. So the three parts of the brain, it's important for migraine sufferers to understand this. Three parts of the brain is basically the cerebellum, which is responsible for balance and coordination and even spinal movements and some vision as well. The cerebellum is called our little brain, and it's very, very important. It coordinates a lot of functioning of the body. The cortex or the hemisphere or the cerebrum, which houses the frontal lobe, which is important for focus and concentration or moral decisions. The temporal lobe, which is important for memory and smell and sound. The parietal lobe is proprioception for feeling our body. I mean, all of these lobes have different functions. And then we have the brainstem, which typically houses all our cranial nerves, which houses the nerve, cranial nerve 5, which is where we have a lot of migraine headache involvement. So all of these things need to be optimally functioning. So basically, sensory input comes from the body and goes to the cerebellum, which goes to the other side of the brain. Thing here, sorry about that. Hopefully you'll stay with me here. Which goes to the other side of the brain and then goes to the brainstem. That's important because when that breakdown occurs, then we are going to have some brain involvement. So what are some of the brain involvement symptoms that you will notice? Chronic pain, chronic fatigue, migraine headaches, irritable bowel, urinary tract infections. We also have fibromyalgia. We just mentioned migraine headaches. Poor posture. I see people walking around like this. I know that their brain is overfiring and it's not able to slow down. And that's what happens is when we lose brain function, we have an overfiring of our sympathetic nervous system. And then even adrenal gland problems. And so what happens now is other parts of the brain can fatigue, and that will result in loss of balance and vertigo, chronic neck pain, clumsiness, disorganized thinking, and lack of output to the different parts of your lobe. So these are huge problems that need to be addressed. Upper brain fatigue can also cause depression, anxiety, difficulty scanning pages, difficulty with verbal expressions, trying to find the words but can't come out of them, decreased memory, or difficulty with focusing. So I mentioned these before and I mentioned them again. You may be watching this video and say, well, that doesn't really apply to me. I just have migraine headaches. If that's you, then that's great, because then you may not have a lot of upper brain fatigue. But if you're watching this video and you're being honest to yourself, you're saying, yeah, that kind of makes sense to me too. I do have some depression. I don't feel great all the time. I get anxious when I hear about stressful things that I don't deal with as well as I used to. I can't find those words right away. It just doesn't seem like my brain is firing the way it should. And that's the reason, is that just basically, metabolically speaking, we're not converting food into energy. That energy is not going into the brain, and then the brain is fatiguing, and it's causing these symptoms. That's the best way to look at it. Upper brain fatigue can also cause changes in handwriting. I look at my patient's handwriting when they come in, and my handwriting as a doctor isn't the cleanest, but I'll ask a patient, have you noticed that your handwriting has changed? And they'll tell me, yeah, their handwriting has changed. Lack of motivation, not being interested in things. These are things that are causing huge problems. So basically, what happens is you have an overfiring of your brain, or we call it your mesencephalon, which is in the brain stem. And then that creates a overfiring of the ocular nerve, which is in the eyes, and then that creates that light sensitivity. So if you're a migraine sufferer and you suffer with visual disturbances or auras, or it's too bright, then potentially it's an overfiring mesencephalon that's creating an overfiring of that ocular nerve, and the least little bit amount of stress creates a too much overwhelming of that. And that's something that probably rings true to you if you're suffering with visual auras or migraine headaches. An overfiring mesencephalon can also go to the spinal cord, which sends messages to your adrenal glands, which causes release of your adrenal hormones, and that creates too much pain or overfiring of your nociceptors. And those nociceptors tell our brain that we're in pain, and because we had that mesencephalon that's responsible for our cranial nerves, and we have a firing of our nociceptors, then all of a sudden all those cranial nerves are in our head, and we experience these migraine headaches. And then we don't sleep because we're fatigued. So that's one of the main reasons, or one of the main ways that we have migraine headaches. It's just that overfiring mesencephalon. The brain is losing its ability to control itself, and it's getting out of hand, and it's not slowing down, and it's all due to this inflammation and inability to convert food into energy. And it goes into what we do about it. What are we actually going to do about it? It kind of really pains me to review blood work and see people do these blood tests and CT scans and EMGs and NCDs and one blood test after the other that no one ever explains to them, and they don't know what's going on. They're just told to take this or take that. And at the end of the day, when I review these things, there's nothing that's being done about it. There's nothing that's being done about the inflammation. I mean, maybe they're taking NSAIDs or they're taking a steroid, but they're not addressing the source of the inflammation. Or they're taking a anti-seizure medication, but they're not addressing the overfiring of the mesencephalon or the underfiring of the temporal lobe. And that's where functional neurology really comes into play. Emotional stress. When we get stressed out emotionally, that will create a feedback loop that becomes broken. So think about it. When I get stressed, my brain tells my adrenal glands, okay, settle down, switch the clutch into a different gear, get back to normal, and then that feedback loop goes back to the brain and says, okay, we're settled down now. You can tell us to stop, to switch gears. Eventually that feedback loop gets broken, and then we develop what's called fibro fog. We don't focus, we have memory loss, we have problems with raciness and anxiety. If you're suffering with migraine headaches and you're suffering with that, then you too are dealing with an overfiring mesencephalon. The other thing that the overfiring of the mesencephalon controls is dilation of the blood vessels. And when that happens, we have too much irritation around those blood vessels, and that creates an overfiring of migraine headaches as well. So how does all of this happen? It happens through chemical stress, through the environment. We're more exposed to pesticides and sprays and chemicals and non-organic foods. And it's in our water, it's in the air we breathe. I go to the gym, and God bless the gym, they keep it clean, and they're cleaning it every day. But this cleaning lady, she's spraying all this sprays that smells like latte or smells like chai tea. And I know at the end of the day, that's not good for me. That chemical exposure is overstressing my immune system and creating inflammation. And it's me that's crazy now because I know about all this stuff. Or we have a sick house syndrome where we live in a house where there's potentially fire retardants, or there's even other emitting of fumes and toxins that we get exposed to on a daily basis. And so that's an overabundance of chemical stress, physical stress, our work, our job, just things like that. Emotional stress, our mother-in-laws, our finances, our student loans, our children, our bosses, our parents. All of this causes fatiguing of the brain and fewer nerve impulses. So if that makes sense to you, that's what happens. Again, chemical, physical stress, things like anemia, tying it back to metabolic problems, blood sugar problems, food sensitivities, immune system problems, poor diet, too much inflammation, bad problems with your thyroid, prescription medications. I'm doing a review today with a patient, and she's on so many medications, it really pains my heart to see because none of these are addressing the actual breakdowns. I mean, they're trying to control it, metformin and some of the other medications that are helping the body create more insulin or be more insulin sensitive or reduce blood pressure, but really it's not fixing the problem. And I liken that to a stream with a factory runoff. And if you keep cleaning that stream or that creek or that river, but you're not actually cleaning the source of the pollutants from the factory that's a mile upstream that keeps running its pollutants down the stream, you're never going to fix that problem. And that's the problem, is you need to go to the source of the problem. And that's what functional medicine does. Emotional stress, we talked about adrenal gland dysfunction, which causes further blood sugar dysregulation. So you really need to be assessed properly. And that means looking at your adrenal glands and looking at your liver and looking at your thyroid function. And most tests that I see with thyroid function, they don't have antibody tests on them. They only test TSH and T4, and they're on medications, and they've never been worked up properly. And again, why am I talking about this? I suffer with a migraine headache. You don't only suffer with a migraine headache. And if you don't understand that by now, hopefully you do, then this video is probably not for you. But if you understand, yeah, you know, I do have fatigue, I do get stressed, I do get anxiety, I don't focus very well, I have chronic pain all over my body, my handwriting is changing, I don't balance very well, I have visual disturbances, I have ringing in my ears, I have all these things. I have insomnia, every time I eat food I get bloaty. If you have all these things, you need to be fixed from the inside, and that's what we can do. So how do you know if you have all these things? First of all, you need proper testing. I can't tell you how many times I see blood work come in and it's not proper testing. It's testing that's been incomplete, or it's testing that's been tested from a laboratory range. We need to do extensive testing. And I told you this a little bit earlier about functional ranges and normal ranges. I'll just leave it at the difference between functional ranges and normal ranges are the fact that it's like the analogy of having kids in school. So I have twins, and they take, they're in seventh grade, and if they do poor on a report card, if they get a C+, it'd be like, you're normal. No problems. We don't need to do anything about it. And then if they bring an F back, I'll say, okay, you're abnormal, so now we need to start to give you extra help. Wouldn't it make sense that when they're getting a C+, they're considered not necessarily up to grade, or they're average, but we want them to excel. And that's how you should feel in life. You are deserving of a healthy, happy, productive, meaningful life. And if you've gotten to the point where you don't feel that, or you don't think that's possible, then stop it. It's in your head. You are inflamed, and it's not your fault because you haven't been addressed properly. You need to be addressed properly, and we can fix the inflammation in your body and get those brain cells firing, get that frontal lobe working, getting more focus and concentration and more motivation and energy, and feeling like you can do the things that you've been wanting to do, like travel or see your grandkids or go for a walk on the beach or eat at a nice restaurant, or these things that are meaningful in life. I mean, life is we have one go around. I heard someone tell me this. We have one go around in this thing called life, and you're deserving of a really good go around, especially in where you are right now in your life and all the sacrifices you've made and what you're deserving of. And I'll be there for you. But here's the thing. I'm not going to care more about you than you are. I mean, I'm really a motivated guy. I'm a really caring guy. I want to help you as much as I possibly can. But if you don't want to help yourself, the analogy is I'm not going to throw you a life preserver and then have you kick and scream as I bring you back in. The great thing about my office is it's not an emergency room. I take some insurance, but it doesn't pay for a lot of the care, which I'll explain to you at the end. And so I really can pick and choose who I'm going to work with. And if you're not going to be as motivated as me, or you're not going to do some of the sacrifices that are going to be needed, or you're just going to be a pain in the butt and you don't want me to help you in that capacity, then you're not going to get accepted. So it really comes down to the fact that you want to change and you want to get better. So what are some of the blood tests that we do? Complete blood profiles with vitamin D. I don't see that on every test. Homocysteine, I don't see that on every test. Uric acid, C-reactive protein, thyroid antibodies, I don't see those on every test. I don't see iron panels on every test, so iron saturation and ferritin. I don't see a lot of things. So I mean, those are starting points. Salivary testing for hormones, for adrenal glands, for progesterone or DHEA or testosterone. I have a buddy of mine, and they have a anti-aging clinic, and all they do is look at your blood test, and when your testosterone is low, they give you more. And when your estrogen goes higher, they give you something to suppress that. What that is that's like juggling. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to keep up with all those juggling balls because you're trying to juggle so many things. It starts with the fundamentals. If I'm teaching my kid a sport, I need to start with the fundamentals. If I'm recovering from migraine headaches, I need to address the fundamentals. And that's what we're basically doing. We do stool samples. We even do hair samples and urine samples for heavy metals. I think that's a huge problem in today's day and age. If you suffer or you have a migraine headache and no one's talked to you about metal toxicity, and you have had silver or mercury in your mouth since the time you're 8 and you're 52 now, and you've had them in there for 40 years plus, and you say, well, you know what, they were removed, chances are the 40 years that you've had them in there is ruinous for your health. Chances are the way that you've had them removed, whether it was a broken tooth, it was crowned right over, you've had a root canal, or they pulled it, or they extracted it, chances are that even liberated even more problems too. So there's a real way to do it and a way not to do it. But suffice to say, if you've had any mercuries in your mouth, you've had different metals in your mouth, I have patients that tell me they used to break open the thermometer and play with the mercury. And so those are very ruinous to your health. Even the water you drink. I don't want to seem like the sky is falling and that the world is coming to an end, but I also want to seem very realistic about the fact that these metals are not being addressed with anyone. And so we can do certain things like infrared sauna. We can do something that I call homeopathic preparations in my office to identify metals. We can even do chelation if it's necessary and pull these out of you, and that will be a real life changer. And most of my patients that have chronic illnesses, the sickest of the sick, they're all toxic with metals. Listen, we all have metals. We all have viruses. We all have bacteria, but it's when we lose the ability to coexist with them that our body breaks down, that we start to suffer. And that's one of the things that really needs to be considered. Some of the testing we do are food sensitivity with Cyrex labs. That tests for autoimmunities and all these other foods that we talked about earlier. And then we do genetic testing. Genetic testing is awesome. Let's just explain it as easy as I possibly can. Do you ever wonder why all of a sudden you got these migraine headaches, or you've been suffering for your whole life, neurodegenerative disorders, heart disease, autoimmune conditions, stroke, or people get cancer? It doesn't just come out of the sky. What happens is you express a mutated gene. We all inherit our genes from our mothers and our fathers, and chances are if you have migraine headaches, your father or mother had migraine headaches. Or if someone has IBS and Crohn's, someone else in the family had IBS or Crohn's. And so we get a lot of these genes passed down to us. So it doesn't necessarily mean we have a pre-written destiny that we're going to develop these things, but when you have inflammation in your body from all the things we just finished talking about, then that's going to cause a problem with your genetic expression. And so what does that mean? We are inflamed. We've talked about this. We're inflamed in our body. And when we have inflammation, it creates the turning on of different genes to code for expressions. And so when we did this Human Genome Project in 2003, we were able to determine the optimal genetic DNA structures for human health. And what's happened since then is we've determined that a lot of people have improper expression of genetic coding. So that means in English, when you eat food, you don't have the ability to convert that food into a usable form. If you've taken chemistry or biology, and you remember the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, and we have oxidative phosphorylation. All these things require methylation. They all require enzymes and substrates. And enzymes are what we have in our cells, and substrates are the nutrition we take. And if we're devoid of enzymes that make this into that, so the example I use for my patient is, imagine an enzyme is like a coin machine. When you put $1 in the coin machine, coins come out. And then you put that coin into the slot machine and you pull down on the slot. Your enzymes are like a coin change machine. And when you don't have the ability to convert the dollar into the coins, then you're not going to be able to spin the slot. That's the easiest way I explain it. So spinning the slot in our body is like detoxifying, or creating happy neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine, or being able to create immune cells. There's over 250 reactions in our body that require the pulling down on the handle by inserting the coin. So what happens in reality is, if you don't know what's going on in your body and how well you're converting these dollars into coins, or these foods into substrates that go to the next formula, then you don't know whether or not taking metformin or taking Ativan or taking triptans or anti-seizures or Neurontin, you don't know if that's going to help you, because at the end of the day, you're missing essential functions, and none of those are going to help you. So basically, these methyl groups, it's all called methylation. And methyl groups get depleted in our body because we're lacking enzymes to help them, but we're also eating crappy foods like white foods, sugars, oils, junk foods, genetically modified foods, and that all creates methylation problems in our body. Methylation problems lead to improper DNA synthesis, brain chemical production minimization, hormone breakdowns, creation of immune cells that aren't being created properly, can't produce energy. So this is very, very important, and this is what's taking my practice to the next level. One of the things I would say is write down 23andme, 23andme, all one word, .com. And that's where we get the genetic testing, but it's what you do with the information. I think the genetic testing is $99, but we incorporate into my programs the interpretation of those. And what does that mean? Are you doomed and destined for a life of inability to methylate and produce chemicals that are necessary for function? No, but we can give you the proper nutrients based on the methylation problems that you have in order to do these things. Poor methylation, we can get chemical sensitivities, fibromyalgia, migraine headaches, chronic fatigue. This is a huge player, and that's what we just mentioned. If you're not methylating properly, or you have genetic mutations, or what we call genetic polymorphisms, or SNPs, then you are not going to methylate properly, you're not going to detox properly, you're not going to reduce inflammation properly, you're not going to produce happy chemicals properly. I'm excited about this because I think it's life-changing. So I may be speaking 1,000 miles a minute with gusts up to 3,000, but realize I'm really passionate about what I do, and that I really believe that this is the cutting edge of healthcare in our society. So genetic testing in a nutshell is the key for you to heal, and it's the key for you to feel proper. These are some slides that I have where these are the genetic dispositions that people have. I have the MTHFR C677 heterozygous. That's a big word, but basically it means I have a reduced 30% reduction in my methylation production. I have patients that have 70% reduction. There's other ones that are important as well, but basically they can increase your likelihood of expressing autoimmunities, anxiety, depression, migraine headaches over and over again. So we talked about brain-based exercises, or brain-based therapy, and how we fatigue our brain with overfiring of the mesencephalon. We talked about metabolic disturbances like adrenal gland dysfunction and blood sugar, anemia, infections, genetic problems. So what do we do to actually help you from the brain-based perspective? Basically what we're doing is we're trying to stimulate the different areas of the brain. Much like if I have muscles fatiguing in my biceps, I stimulate my bicep muscles. So things like stimulating the right temporal lobe through smells, things like stimulating the parietal lobe through touch, things like stimulating the cerebellar through vibration and balance, things like stimulating the cerebellum with decompression. We do those things. Basically, your body needs, or your brain needs fuel. We need to regulate your metabolism, and we need to give it oxygen, and we need to give it exercises. So that's what we do in the office. Some of the things are oxygen therapy, vibration, neurological brain exercises, vestibular exercises, eye lights we talked about, iPad exercises are really, really great. We also do a proper metabolic workup, a proper neurological exam. When you come in, we do a neurological exam to determine where in your brain are you not having optimal firing of. Genetic testing we suggest. We basically need to think of it as a Rubik's Cube, and we need to put all the puzzles together, like your cerebellum, your midbrain, oxygen deficiencies, hormones, blood sugar, cortisol. We basically need to put all these things together, and it takes time to put that process together. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of this video today. What's next? What's next is I offer a 2-visit workup. The first visit is I have you come in and we do a neurological eval. You fill out my metabolic assessment forms, you fill out my brain functional assessment forms, and my brain nutritional assessment forms. These are standardized questionnaires to tell me where potentially are you having deficits. Is it the temporal lobe? Is it the parietal lobe? Is it the gastrointestinal system? Is it our blood sugar levels? Is it potentially lack of nutrients to the brain? Is it dopamine production? So I go over that with a fine-tooth comb to figure out a game plan before we even begin. Then I sit down and we sit about for 45 minutes and we go over, tell me about when it all happened. Tell me about some of the things that no one's ever told you about. Have you had any metals in your mouth? Have they been removed? Have you been exposed to viruses or molds or other chemicals or toxicities that no one's really talked about? Has your mother, father, grandson, granddaughter, grandparent, do they suffer with similar like conditions? What have you done? Let me look at all your tests. Bring in your blood work. I'll put it on a functional scale and tell you, even though you've been told you're normal, you're not necessarily healthy. You're trending towards anemia in this area, or you're trending towards, liver dysfunction in this area. Day 2, you come in and I go over everything I found. Okay, Mrs. Jones, we have brain-based disorders, mostly on the right brain versus the left brain. These are the exercises we're going to do to stimulate that. You have metabolic disorders and or you have dysfunctions, and these are the things we're going to do about that. And we need to do genetic testing. We may need to do some food sensitivity testing. We want to put you on a detox protocol. We want to reduce inflammation. We want to remove the irritants. We want to stabilize your body, and we want to be able to give you the life you deserve. Does that sound like a good plan to you? If it is, then I want you to call my office. However, I have a couple requirements. Number one, I always suggest the spouse be there, because the last thing I want to do is, I'm a busy guy, and that's why I've created this video. I see chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, diabetes, type 1 and type 2, insomnia, IBS and Crohn's, migraine headaches. And so I've created this video because it's a necessity for you to watch before you come and see me or before we go over a report. But when I do a neurological exam and I do a blood review panel and I put it on a normal scale versus a functional scale or a functional scale, your spouse should care enough to be there, number one, and number two, see what's going on. I mean, if you go back at home and say, okay, well, this guy told me I can't really remember, like something was with my genetic test that's not going to explain anything to them, and they need to be in on it with you. On day 2, I'm going to go over the obligations. Some of the insurances that patients have will be covered with some of the brain exercises we do in the office. Potentially the homeopathic protocols and or some infrared technologies that we're doing, or decompression or brain exercises aren't covered, and testing isn't covered. So there's going to be an out-of-pocket requirement. I can guarantee you that. I only accept 5 new migraine headache sufferers a month. That's because I'm a very busy practitioner. I see, like I mentioned, all these other cases. Typically, I charge $450 for both those visits, not $450 each, $450 for 2. Because you've sat down and watched this video, I charge only $75, and that's a reservation fee. If I don't feel I can help you, or you don't think that the neurological exam was thorough enough, then I'll give you your money back. Basically, The $75 is to reserve my time, because unfortunately people cancel and then I set aside 45 minutes to an hour and I'm out of luck for being able to help anyone if you cancel with too little time for me to change it. 3 rules of acceptance is you need to be able to make some changes. If I tell you you need to get off certain foods and you're not willing to do that, then this program is not for you. It's not easy. I'll be there to hold your hand and help you along the way and care for you and do what we need to do and keep you accountable. But there's some changes that you need to make, and it's not a matter of just taking that pill. Hopefully by now you realize it's not a matter of just taking a pill, going to bed, waking up the next day, there's a big beanstalk outside of your house, you climb up it, and now there's a pot of gold. That's not going to happen. You're going to need to make some changes, sacrifices through time, energy, and finances. Like I mentioned earlier, insurance covers some of the stuff that I do, but it doesn't cover all of it. So patients will say, well, how much does it cost? And my true answer is, I don't know. I don't know how bad your condition is. Is there neurological deficits? Is there a lot of toxicity? Is your metabolic functioning out of control? Do you have genetic predispositions? I have no idea how much it's going to cost you. I think it could cost anywhere between $150 per month to $300 per month for 12 to 24 months finance, if that's finance. That's a ballpark. However, I give discounted plans if someone pays me for it in advance, and I also have insurance which will cover some of the things that I do. So that's the ballpark, people. And if that doesn't, I say to people in my workshop, if it's not worth $150 a month for 20 months to get your life back, then I can't help you, because you're not sick enough for you to want to get help. And that's good, because you don't feel you're sick enough. But hopefully you do realize that this makes sense and it's worth an investment. We spend money on cell phones, we spend money on crap. But when it comes time to, literally, like if I was a plumber and I told you, okay, you got crap all over your floor, sorry about my language, and you have a broken septic tank. I don't even know if that's possible. But if I told you that, you wouldn't say, oh, all right, I'll think about it. You want it out of there. You may call the next plumber and say, hey, are you cheaper than this guy? They pretty much do the same thing. Hopefully by now you realize I don't do the same thing as everyone else. And my program's not just going to fix your toilet, it's going to give you the life that you want back. Think about how serious you are. I'm not going to accept you if you're not serious. Think about how it's affected you and your ability to work or make an income, or your ability to live the time that you have left here in health and happiness. How is it affecting your loved one? Is your loved one suffering, seeing you suffer? Hopefully this made a lot of sense to you. So the time now is to give my office a call, 561-883-0090, and tell them that you just watched my migraine video and you're ready to get your life back and to change it, and tell Sydney or David that you want to set up an appointment for 2 visits. And I really look forward to seeing you. Thank you for staying with me the whole video long, and I look forward to your health and happiness. Thank you so much.